Sumerian civilization. The world of Mesopotamia means literally between the rivers, but it is generally used to denote the whole plain between and on either side of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. The plain was bordered to the north and east by mountain ranges, in whose foothills agriculture was first practiced. Each year, the two great rivers were swollen with the winter snows of the northern mountains, and each year, at the flood stage, they spread a thick layer of immensely fertile silt across the floodplain where they approached the Persian Gulf. It was in this delta, a land of swamp rich in fish, wildlife, and date palms, that agricultural settlers created the rich city-states of Sumer between 3500 and 3000 BC. The delta could only be made habitable by large-scale irrigation and flood control, which was first managed by a priestly class and then by godlike kings. Little is known about the origins of the Sumer people, who spoke a language totally distinct from the Semitic inhabitants of the valleys to the north. The Sumerians probably moved down into the swamps of the delta under pressure of overpopulation of the foothills after 3900 BC. Although at first they formed small agricultural villages, they soon found not only that the richness of the alluvial land permitted greater density of settlement, but also that the vast engineering works in canals and dikes necessary to harness the annual floods required workforces of hundreds of men. Moreover, the layout and clearing of the canals required expert planning, while the division of the irrigated land, the water, and the crops demanded political control. By 3000 BC, the Sumerians had solved this problem by forming temple communities. All Sumerian cities recognized a number of gods in common. Each city, moreover, had its own god, who was considered to literally inhabit the temple and who was in theory the owner of all property within the city. Hence the priests, who interpreted the will of the god and controlled the distribution of the economic produce of the city, were venerated for their supernatural and material functions alike. When the growing warfare among the cities made military leadership vital after 3000 BC, the head of the army, who became king, assumed an intermediate position between the gods and the priestly class. Thus, king and priest represented the upper class in a hierarchical society. Below them were the scribes, the secular attendants of the temple, who supervised every aspect of the city's economic life and who developed a rough judicial system. The priests and scribes of the temples must be credited with the great advances made by the Sumerians in both arts and science. In order to keep the accounts of the temple food storehouses, they engraved pictures on clay tablets in a form of writing known as cuneiform, wedge-shaped, the oldest known writing system. A rich epic literature and scripture were also created to serve the needs of the temples and then of the kings. Even more demanding in artistic technique were the small cylinder seals used to roll one's signature into the wet clay of a tablet recording a commercial transaction. Thousands of these tablets have been found in the temple compounds, proving that the bureaucrats of Sumer had developed a complex commercial system. Moreover, the planning of the vast public works under their control led the priests to develop a useful mathematical notation, including both a decimal notation and a system based upon 60. Besides, Both for religious and agricultural purposes, Sumerians also studied the heavens and created a lunar calendar with a day of 24 hours and a week of 7 days. At that time, mud, clay, and reeds were the only materials the Sumerians had in abundance, and trade was therefore necessary to supply the city workers with materials. Merchants went out in overland caravans or in ships to exchange the products of Sumerian industry for wool, stone, and metals. There are indications that Sumerian sailing vessels even reached the valley of the Indus River in India. The increase in trade between Sumerian cities and between Sumeria and other more distant regions not only led to the growth of a merchant class, but spread many of its achievements to other areas.